But many people believe that food prices could be an even bigger crisis for the world. Can you explain?
Yeah, and that's partly because prices of food were already very high on historic levels. Frankly, before Russia invaded Ukraine, you mentioned that UN Food and Agriculture Index. It's already at the highest levels it's been since 2011. And remember what was going on in 2011. We heard Arab Spring sweeping across the Middle East, and in part, food inflation was a really key part of that story. So we expect prices to move even higher. Russia, Ukraine, really key to producing a lot of the food products, grain responsible for more than 25% of those cargoes shipped to the market, particularly strong in this region. We're looking at corn. Nearly a quarter of the corn trade comes from these two countries. So those are things you could really see in your pocketbook if this crisis continues.
And Simone, it's not even in the short term. I mean, it's the longer term impact as well, because as you mentioned, I mean, we're coming up on springtime when these farmers are planting. So prices are not likely to abate anytime soon for consumers, right?
Right, yeah, this is absolutely going to disrupt the key part of the planting season in Ukraine and Russia. And the fact that ships aren't even going there, people aren't even doing business, even if suddenly ports were to open up in a couple of months, there might not be crops in the ground, and then the crops in the ground might not be there in part because the farmers didn't have money to go and put them in the ground, even if their area where they were was safe. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the long term, people can deal with high prices for a moment, say, but when a government is forced to eliminate its subsidies on bread prices, something Egypt has considered, that has a longer term impact, and it's going to change consumer behavior on the ground, and then add that into a rising energy bill, and this is kind of a real recipe for concern here.
Right, and Simone, do we know where this is going to be felt the hardest by consumers? I mean, you're in Doha, I'm in New York. What's your outlook when you look at some of the prices?
Well, wheat has been the one that's really in focus. And we've seen buyers of wheat from this region, in particular Egypt, Jordan, go to the market. And they have actually failed in some of their offers or their tender offers because the prices that come back to them simply too high, or there are no offers at all in terms of getting wheat. They have some stockpiles of wheat hanging out in the background, but those will last a certain amount of months. So then they're going to be looking to countries elsewhere in the world to try and meet that gap. How much extra product is out there is really the concern. Canada, for example, had a pretty minimal wheat crop come in because it had particularly dry conditions. And you can't change things like the weather. These are long-term things that take a long time to play out and be felt.